Hello and welcome to Magic is Real. I'm your host, Shannon, and today I have with me Christine Clawley. I'm going to read Christine's bio to you. Christine is an NDE experiencer, a counselor, and a life coach who has worked in a variety of capacities. After overcoming the life-threatening necrotizing fasciitis at age 24, she embarked on a journey of healing and self-understanding through exploring various holistic techniques, including a mindfulness practice, meditation, yoga, self-hypnosis, and indigenous healing modalities. Prior to contracting this illness, she received many dreams and messages that foreshadowed her illness. While spending nearly a month in a medically induced coma, she had many dreams that mirrored what was happening to her on a physical, emotional, and spiritual level. Upon awakening from the coma, she experienced increased intuition, empathy, and an increased frequency of lucid and precognitive dreams. These experiences have led her to research topics related to near-death experiences, consciousness, non-ordinary reality, synchronicity, dreaming, and shamanism, all of my favorite topics. So I'm so thrilled to have you here, Christine. Thank you so much for joining me.
Awesome, wonderful to be here. And I'm so impressed you pronounced my name correctly and you even identified that horrible illness
I'm kind of a
correctly as
medical
well.
nerd. I'm really fascinated by medical stuff, so
Mhm.
I already knew what that was, and I am so sorry that you had to go through it, but I'm so grateful that you're here and healthy.
Yes, thank you. And actually, when someone thinks about necrotizing fasciitis or the flesh-eating bacteria, I'm sure a lot of, frightening, scary images come to mind.
Yeah.
But at this point in my life, I really look back to that experience and I have a lot of gratitude. And I even celebrate the day I should have died as my second birthday, kind of acknowledging that this near death experience led to a complete rebirth of who I
Oh,
was in many ways.
that is so
Yeah.
beautiful. I'm so glad to hear that. And I want to thank you too. We were supposed to, I want to bring this up because it's leading to something else, but we were supposed to have our Zoom today at a certain time, and I just dropped the ball and forgot about it. And so you reached out to me, and I thanked you for how gracious you were about forgiving me for being so absent-minded. And I was telling you that I just think that one of the gifts of people coming back from NDEs is that they really have just a deeper understanding of why we're here, and they don't sweat the small stuff as much, and they are in the flow of things. And I've learned to be much more like that, where now if something happens that is not preferable, or, something happens that's unforeseen, I really just say it's divine timing, it's divine timing. And I knew that you had something wise to say about that, so I wanted to hand you the mic.
Yes, thank you
Yeah.
so much. And I really think this is such an important issue and topic in our culture is the nature of time, how we relate to time. And I actually wrote my master's thesis on this very topic because from my personal experience, and I think a lot of people out there who are, working the 9 to 5, we are tied to this rigid clock time. And so often, the intuitive time, the timing of our bodies doesn't sync up with that artificial clock time. And especially when it comes to situations of, grief, loss, illness, I look at those as kind of wake up calls that maybe we've gone too far into the direction of sacrificing these things to conform with the pyramidal time structure that we have in this society where people who are more wealthy are time rich, therefore they can plan their future, influence the future of others. Whereas those who are time poor or struggling with, poverty, they may be working 3 or 4 jobs. They don't have the time to care for their children properly, their bodies. We know about the health impact, mental health impact. So this is something I'm really passionate about. Is and struggle with still in my own life is how do we come to recognize how we've enslaved ourselves to this time system and monetary system in a lot of ways. There's that saying, time is money. And I think that's really tragic and unfortunate that we've reduced this amazing gift of life. And I love the name of your podcast, Magic is Real, because when you've had an NDE experience, you come back, or at least I came back to this reality. And I was so grateful for just the small things, which I can kind of get into a little later. But this is an incredible planet. There's so much beauty. There is so much to be enjoyed, and there's so much connection. But so often it's, that perceived choice of, well, I have to survive. So I have to, sacrifice this, and this. And so I really think it's a revolutionary act, not only in our personal, but sometimes professional lives to uh, kind of go against that time system in some ways, to offer grace to one another. That, okay, if you're a minute or two late, that's not necessarily showing respect. There's a quote I just want to bring up from my thesis here. And this is for, let's see. So this is a book called, I believe it's The Silent Language by Edward T. Hall. And in studying Native American culture, he found that the Pueblo Indians, for example, who live in the Southwest, have a sense of time which is in complete variance with the clock-bound habits of ordinary American citizens. For the Pueblos, events begin when the time is ripe and no sooner. So for different cultures, there's this way of really looking at reciprocity, relationship, right timing, intention, emotional state. And, that's very hard to reconcile with this clock time, which is very, rigid, rush from one thing to another. And in our society, it's about cramming as much as you can into a 24-hour period. And with, the internet and technology, that busyness becomes exponentially harder to resist. So I'll
Oh,
just
that
pause.
was so good, Christine. Thank you for sharing that. Man, having lived in LA for most of my life, the stress of all of that and the I have an audition, I have to be there. If I'm late, they're going to yell at me. It's like everything is so tense. And now I'm in Arizona like you, and we don't even do daylight savings time, which is beautiful. And I wonder if it has something to do with that sort of Native American element where we're like, we're not doing that, man. Yes, that's beautiful. Thank you for that awesome insight. That's a great way to start the podcast. I would love to know about you and your background, wherever you want to start, just as it pertains to your spiritual journey.
Yes, absolutely. So I do feel lucky. I just want to give my parents credit. They really encouraged me to explore different spiritualities, philosophy, from the Bible to Eastern religion to yoga, meditation. So I did have this kind of exposure as a young person, but like many young people who have, 12 years of public schooling and then, college, etc., I really became, how should I say, I identified as a type A. And I was really trying to survive in this world, conform. And looking back, I have such compassion for myself because I was sacrificing a lot of who I was on a core level to, make money. And so at the time of my illness, I'll just start with that. I had recently graduated from college with a degree in philosophy and psychology, which I loved. I felt very supported in that environment. And then when I went into the working world again, um, that was a hard shift to go from this environment of intellectual freedom and having a voice to, being another employee. And I was doing sales and advertising, and that just wasn't very fulfilling to me. I didn't feel very well respected in some of my jobs, and I was really struggling with depression. I was definitely drinking more than I should have. And I would say about, 6 months to maybe even a year leading up to this experience, um, I had these very intense dreams where I, was being strangled by this kind of dark haired, indigenous looking woman. I don't want to make any, assumptions about what that necessarily is because symbolically it could be many different things. But she was choking me. And that's what I was doing in my daily life. I was choking off my voice, my creative expression. I had a lot of, repressed anger. And I do believe after working in the mental health world for so long that a big part of depression is anger turned inward or suppressed. When people feel so hopeless and that there's nothing they can do to change their situation, it's often acted out towards oneself. And then I also had a dream that there was a cyst in my throat. I was trying, or a mass, and I was trying to remove it. And that is where the infection started. And then in addition to that, I've always loved, writing, journaling, doing poetry. And even a couple months ago, I was looking back on my journals, and the imagery was just unbelievably similar to the experience I went through. And so I'm really fascinated and interested in this idea that there's a part of our psyche that exists outside of time. And that these feelings, yes, I was in a state of depression, but there was, I think, some element of my consciousness knowing that this event maybe was going to happen. And so, I had this I'll go into the illness and trigger warning for anyone out there. I'll try not to go into too great a detail. Um, but leading up to the illness, I, got what I thought was flu at the time. People around me had strep, and this was only 2 weeks. I didn't have health insurance because I just started a new job,
Of course.
of course.
Yeah, great timing.
And so I went to the ER. And, I knew something was seriously wrong and that I could possibly die, but I couldn't, they didn't believe me, at the hospital, like so many people who go
Oh,
there
yeah.
seeking help, unfortunately. And I understand ERs are overwhelmed and they don't have all the resources. But I went home after that and I thought, well, I'm gonna die. And so I called my parents to pick me up, take me home to their house. And for the next couple days, I was just in this state of kind of in and out of consciousness. And they thought, well, you've just been to the hospital, maybe you'll get better. But I was not getting better. It was very difficult to swallow, to eat. And there was a moment where all of a sudden this red lifted rash formed around my neck. And very quickly, in a matter of seconds, it just spread all the way down to my chest and abdomen. And then my heart just started pounding out of my chest, and I knew this was it. So I reached out to my parents. They drove me to the ER. I don't remember making it there. But shout out to Memorial Hospital in Colorado Springs. I just want to cry. The doctors and nurses just really fought to save my life. I'm so grateful to them. And so when they realized I was in septic shock, I had a collapsed lung, and they just thought, it was pneumonia, they'll patch up my lung, do a tracheotomy. But when they went in to do the tracheotomy, they saw this was much more serious of an infection. And so I only had about a 1 to 10% chance of surviving because with this illness, they often have to amputate because it's just so aggressive. It spreads so quickly. But this is in my
It's in your
throat,
throat. Yeah.
chest, and abdomen. And so I was in a medically induced coma for about 3.5 weeks. And during that time, I was, from my experience, living in these other realities, other worlds. And I won't go too in depth to this. I think I recently saw a great movie I just want to plug in here as well, called Strawberry Mansion. It's kind of an independent small film, production, but I really appreciated the way they showed the overlapping nature of, dreams, near death experiences, and potentially these other realities. I thought they did an incredible job. And so for myself, this was what some might call a distressing NDE. I had dreams which reflected what was happening to me on a physical and emotional level. So my brain interpreted these operations where they were opening me up, closing me up, as being tortured by doctors. And so that was very scary. I was, frightened. It was not that pleasant, obviously. And then so that was kind of the first set of dreams. And then it shifted to being in this kind of in between realm where not a whole lot was happening. It was like I was resting and floating on this very, warm, beautiful water in this underground cave with these red lanterns all around me. And the music, I can still hear this music. And I still feel this eerie feeling of just knowing, this isn't like normal reality. There's something else going on here, but it wasn't too frightening. But then that dream later transitioned to another dream where it felt like I lived out an entire life. And I was this Asian woman in my late 40s or 50s. And I was trapped on this ship, this wooden ship out in the ocean with all these other women. And I was kind of like the manager of these women, and I had to bring them onto the ship. And we were human trafficking victims. And there was just this sense of hopelessness, depression, isolation. We were not allowed to look at one another, talk to one another. And this was my life. And I felt there was no hope of ever escaping or getting off this ship. And so this lasted for, what just felt like an eternity. And then there was this moment where I saw this beautiful woman that I felt to be my sister. And we locked eyes, and there was just this compassion and this shared knowing and understanding of one another's pain. And it was like in that moment, the only way I can describe it, it's like a spell was broken. And the whole tone of the dream began to change, and there was hope, and we were planning to help and liberate one another. And, shortly after that experience, I remember waking up. And so, that was an incredibly impactful experience. I also remember upon waking, just feeling, I believe I had another experience where I surrendered so much to that fight, that was going on for my life. There was this moment where I do remember knowing that there is no death and feeling just this unbelievable sense of love. There was no pain. There was just complete acceptance and understanding that everything that I had gone through, was necessary. And so it was an incredible experience. And then waking up, I was just very confused, coming back to this reality and, realizing like, oh my gosh, that was just a dream. I'm back in this body. And the recovery was hard. I had to, I was down to 80 some pounds. I was intubated still, even when I woke up. And it took me quite some time to get off the respirator because my lungs were so weak. And so that experience, was amazing and profound. And I still consider that a life-changing experience. Those feel like real memories to me and very much have impacted the work that I do, with survivors of assault, and, trying to empower, women and change this paradigm where, well, I'll get into that a little later. I'll come back to the experience though. The healing experience was another incredible lesson in that I had to learn to just try my best and then let go of expectations because the progress was so slow. And I didn't know if I would ever be able to breathe again. I couldn't talk. So I didn't know if I'd be able to talk again. I still suffer from paralyzed vocal cord. Um, I didn't know if I'd be able to walk, if I'd ever be able to work. So I would just put in the effort, do what I could and then let go. But every moment felt so important, the love I had for my family. And it was just like this rebirth and in a, symbolic and also kind of a literal way, because I had to work hard to get all these things I had taken for granted back. And I also went through the experience. I think this is important to talk about as a woman in our culture, losing my hair, having all these scars. And as a young woman, most of us are identified with our appearance. And that was, this kind of grieving process of accepting, what happened to me, my new body, my new identity, not being able to relate to my peers, having, PTSD like symptoms come up and flashbacks. But there was something else that was happening, and that was some kind of residual effect from that experience, which fits in line with a lot of the near-death experiences. And so even though I didn't clinically die in this case, I was very close to death. I can identify with near-death experiencers because I was in this other space, this other realm for so long, and then because of the after effects, which were very, very confusing to me and challenging. Because when I think someone has a traumatic experience, um, and I want to be careful in saying this because I don't want to glorify traumatic experiences, but I also want to talk about the possible benefit of some of these traumatic experiences. And for myself, the boundary between self and other wasn't as great. I was very intuitive, extremely empathic. So, I would go to the grocery store and I could just feel, what other people were going through and would get these impressions. And that can be very overwhelming for a person who's not used to that. Um, and then in addition to that, a big part of my journey has been about lucid dreaming and precognitive dreaming. And so this really challenged my reality because, I'm a kind of a traditional Western person thinking I have free will and, I'm in control of my destiny. And then I dream something, sometimes mundane, sometimes very big. And then it happens, almost exactly as I dreamt it. And I still have these experiences. I document them and I collect them and I affirm these experiences in my clients because in the mental health field, we have traditionally pathologized these kinds of experiences. And this goes along with colonialism. A lot of indigenous cultures all over this planet valued dreams. They valued intuition, visions, synchronicities as powerful signs, information that can be life-saving and very impactful. And with colonialism, and I would say, the Inquisition, certain religious movements, this knowledge was very much suppressed or demonized or labeled as crazy. So language and labels are extremely powerful. And this was kind of a difficult part of my journey, was coming to grips with these experiences, questioning, okay, is this real? Am I, do I have some kind of mental health disorder? But again, if these experiences are lining up, if there's documentation, and maybe even other witnesses kind of validating these experiences, why should we exclude these from scientific research and that kind of thing? So, and I'm not the only one. There's many other people I can cite. There's many really powerful thinkers and scientists who are writing books, who are running experiments. And I believe we are in a renaissance right now where this information could be potentially shifting, this paradigm. Yeah.
I agree. The fact that I'm never at a loss to find guests for this podcast after 2 years, there are thousands upon thousands of people. Some of them don't even talk about it for cultural reasons too. Sometimes they're different. You notice a lot of people are like kind of similar and that are speaking out about it. And then there are people like African American people that have said to me, well, I had one, but I didn't, it's not really accepted in my culture as often. So you may, notice that there's a disparity of representation, but it really sometimes comes down to, well, we don't, our culture is more religious and we don't talk about this because I might be shunned from my religious community or whatever. And yeah, it's really important. And I'm finding more and more people are less surprised when I say, yeah, I have a podcast about near death experiences and I'm a medium. They go, wow, cool. It's not like, what are you talking about? You're crazy. So I am so grateful you got your voice back. I know you would have written no matter what, but I'm so glad. As someone who's also suffered from numerous vocal disorders, um, and I know that it may not have been as severe an experience, but it was traumatic for me too, especially I'm a voice actor. And our voice, my voice is like super important. Your voice is super important, and you have a message to share. And yes, we can write it, but there's something so scary about having that box of expression taken where you can't talk and you can't share and you can't. It's very difficult. So I would love to know. So you've. I know that it can be difficult to come back into reality, and as you just described, some of the ways in which it can be difficult, um, assimilating back into this dense world. You taught. I know that you've done a lot of research on these topics. What are some of the? I mean, this could be anything really. Just what are some of the most profound things that you've like? What's something really profound that you've learned about the nature of existence and our souls and what we're doing here? Go, just
Oh, it's a
brief.
good one.
Yeah, just
Hold on. Yeah, sit with that a minute.
yeah.
I think it's the whole thing. It's all these different experiences, and I never get used to it. It's it always brings up this sense of magic and wonder and awe. And I think there's really this kind of tension and struggle. And maybe it's supposed to be this way. Maybe that's why we're living, in these times. But I think there's this tension between this kind of scientific materialism worldview, which views, matter as dead, time is linear. Um, let's see, causes as A influences B. And even the scientific method, while it's a wonderful thing, you're isolating variables to study the relationship, but you're excluding other variables. And with quantum theories and some of these other theories out there, and a lot of ancient wisdom, there's this other worldview where we are incredibly powerful beings. The universe is alive, is interactive. We're constantly influencing it, sending information out, receiving. There's, who knows, maybe we're multidimensional. Maybe there's other realities, other states of consciousness. And I think it's so important to question, to question this other reality that, again, strips people, nature, animals, beings, even objects down to just objects to be used. And I think what we're needing right now is a different belief system, worldview, reality. And I'm very, very much influenced by, Immanuel Kant and Friedrich Nietzsche. And Nietzsche is all about this post-morality where it's this reevaluation of our values. We're coming out of this system that kind of strips the earth of meaning and value. And again, the earth is a resource to be used. Humans are resources to be used. And it's all about maximizing profit, and it's a very dehumanizing worldview. And now we're throwing AI technology into the mix. And what kind of impact is that going to have with this worldview, with the consolidation of power? And this other reality, this other worldview, I think is a very positive kind of antidote to what has come before. And it's not maybe necessarily that new. I mean, there's ancient roots of this kind of worldview, this kind of thinking. And I personally see the effects. I see the effects of, these beliefs, this conditioning in my clients. And I think the other powerful part of near death experiences is when we begin to really lean into the fear of death, um, meditate on, consider our own mortality. What do we want to do with this gift of life? How do we want to spend our time? Again, it puts things into perspective of how we want to live our life. And is life just about accumulating things and climbing up the social ladder or this or that? Or is it about something deeper, something else? And I think what's going on, yeah, politically, socially, I've heard people say, oh, this is the age of narcissism. And certainly there is a big part of that. But especially in the US, it seems as though we're really getting this feedback of, yes, we're a culture that just worships youth, superficiality, money, power. And that just is kind of boring, I guess. And doesn't there's no soul in that. There's no depth. And so as a culture, I think we are going through kind of a big transformation where maybe we're rediscovering our roots. We're having we're seeing the results and the consequences of our decisions. We're seeing that from an environmental standpoint, socially, economically, and as painful as that can be, facing all these existential challenges, AI included, there's gifts in that. There's gifts in that, especially if we can be present with the pain, if we can use that as a catalyst for spiritual growth, and to make meaning of these experiences.
That was a beautiful answer. Worth the 3-second wait. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much. I also am just whipping out a sort of a random topic that I'd love to speak with you about. I'm also a psychic medium, and I say also because we're all mediums. We're all energy, we're all souls. We all have the ability to connect with the other realms. People who come back from near-death experiences tend to have heightened sixth senses, if you will, heightened senses, as you said, where you can start to see images or you can start to feel other people's energy more intensely. And sort of along those lines, I just had a random word come to mind, synchronicity. And I'd love you to just riff on the concept of synchronicity.
Ah, thank you. Yes. And so Jung coined this term synchronicity, which is this a-causal principle connecting our inner world with the outer world. So it's as if the inner content of our mind is kind of manifested or reflected externally. Now, one of my favorite authors, Eric Wargo, he challenges this description of synchronicity, and he talks about precognition and other ways of looking at synchronicity, which I think are very valid and interesting. But the important thing for me when it comes to synchronicity, precognition, whatever you call it, is that this is, again, kind of an antidote to that other worldview. This is a way of making meaning. And it can, so Jung used this in therapy with his patients. He observed it in his own life. And I've had, really profound, fascinating synchronicities. And you can use any word you want to kind of explain or capture these experiences. But sometimes they are life-saving. Sometimes they connect with loved ones who are going through something very, difficult. So that's one of the most common experiences that I come across in some of my research, is that, a family member is in an accident or suffering or close to death, and that other person knows. Another incident that I'll just share, this was one of the most profound, life-saving synchronicities, and I'm still so grateful for this experience. I was visiting a friend in California, at a bookstore. This book just seemed to be calling to me, even though I was like, no, don't spend more money, because I have a book problem, book addiction. But I grabbed this book. I'm flying back home to Denver, and I'm reading. I get to this chapter, and something intuitively inside me just says, okay, just sit with what you had just read. And what I had just read was that having the symptoms of burning lungs can mean that you're having a heart attack, which I've never read before. And the author was talking about how his wife had saved his life by reading this on the back of a cereal box. And so I had just read this. My father was picking me up from the airport, and he said, my lungs are burning. My lungs are burning. It's the pollution in Denver. Get me out of here. I need you to drive. And I looked over, and it was almost like I could see his spirit kind of leaving his body. And I just thought, no, I need to take you to the hospital. And he's going, no, 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 just take me, back to the Springs where, it's cleaner air. So I go against his orders, and I drive him to the hospital, and they have to operate on him right there. His heart, one of his arteries was 99% clogged, and it was very, very life-threatening. I don't know if we would have made it,
Oh my
to
goodness.
Colorado Springs. So that's one case of how do you explain that through our normal concept of linear time? I mean, just the right life-saving information came to me at the right moment and allowed me, to use this. So this can be very practical. And I'm still on the fence about whether or not we can change the future or change what's supposed to happen. And this is a really frustrating area to study. Another amazing speaker and author, Elizabeth Crone, who co-wrote Changed in a Flash with Jeffrey Kripal. She has these repeated precognitive experiences of major disasters, such as plane crashes, tsunamis. She gets very specific information, but she feels like, well, gosh, what's the point of these experiences if I can't change them? And there's another researcher I want to throw out there, Julia Mossbridge, and she's also doing a lot of work studying how maybe we can use precognition to help, stop disasters or things like that. But coming back to Eric Wargo's theory, his idea is that maybe there's time loops, and maybe we can send information back through time and into the future. So I really think considering other models and really, beginning to see the practical application of this. And you as a psychic and a medium, I mean, it's an incredibly powerful way of knowing. It's often instantaneous. It can be very accurate. And you don't have to go through all of the left brain, I've got to look this up, I've got to prove,
Yeah.
research, get all these sources, prove it. Yes, that can be helpful in some ways. And yes, sometimes we can make mistakes with our intuition, or things don't always turn out the way, but how, I just think, why not consider this a valid way of knowing? And
Hmm.
so again, my hope is that we're going to be going through a paradigm shift where these are considered valid experiences and not pathologized.
I appreciate that too. And the thing is that even like the CIA has been using remote viewing, and I've remote viewed before, which was the first time it ever happened. And I realized, oh my God, this is real. We have so many abilities beyond what we believe that we do or we know that we do. And when we were growing up, it was all fantasy. It was all like movies and
Mhm.
science fiction. And yet these people knew something. I mean, George Lucas, I understand, was a near-death experiencer.
Absolutely.
Good versus
Yes.
evil, the forces, the whole thing. There's so much I'm getting chills for some reason about that, but
Mm.
I think it kind of feels like spirits like yes, yes, that these things we were told were fantasy, but in fact they were based in reality. And now we're starting to see that. I mean, the fact that I became a medium later in life, and I did it almost to prove to myself it was real. And once I did started doing it, I learned that this is real. This is very real. There is a way that I can communicate with spirits, people who are out of their bodies, and they are giving me very accurate information. And it seems so fantastical, but we call it paranormal or supernatural. It's not, it's normal and natural. That's it.
100% agree with you. It's the most normal, natural thing. It's our
Yeah,
birthright as human beings. And for some reason, this has been discouraged. This has been, fear has been used to suppress, I think, these innate gifts that we have.
absolutely. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's so true. And what, off the top of your head, what do you want people to know?
Okay. Yes. I've been really thinking about this more and more and more, and just seeing the power and healing in my life and in others' lives, just the power of connection.
Yeah,
That when we move out of a society where, kind of like rats, we view each other as competition. I have to step on this person to get to this next thing, or I need to go faster to beat this person. That is a very lonely, isolating, not fun way to live life. And that when we connect, when we open up, when we share our experiences, our vulnerability with safe people, just magical things happen. And so I've just, I know we're living in this age where a lot of us are isolated on our computers much of the time. But, the positive side of the internet is there's this incredible ability to connect. Um, and that it's so powerful for people to share their experiences, and especially share their experiences of things that have been stigmatized, silenced, such as, abuse, sexual abuse, exploitation, and just how powerful it is for people to come together and support one another. I love watching documentaries, and I've watched quite a few recently on different cults or religious organizations, where these survivors, come together, share their experiences and just the healing that comes from that. So no matter what a person has gone through, I think finding other people who they can relate to, who understand them on some level, can be just incredibly healing and transformative. And again, that is kind of the antidote to this old way of looking and being, this rigid hierarchy and system of exploitation. When people talk, when people share information and work together, I mean, so much can be done. And we can live, we can transform society and culture into something. Maybe I sound like an idealist, probably so, but we can change, we can heal, we can find new ways of living.
Thank you for that. This is why podcasting I think is so important and why people love podcasts. It's reaching a lot of people and talk about synchronicity right before we got on this call. One of my very best friends lost her baby at 5 days old, and she is in a grief a writing group with other bereaved people, but also like people who've lost their children. I think she's in two, and she was just saying, I said, "How is that feeling for you?" And she said, "It's been the most comforting, lovely thing. We've become like a family." And I told her, as a 12 stepper, I understand when you enter a group of people that have understand it, no matter your circumstances are different, but you have a shared pain. The bottom line is it's the hurt and the pain and the understanding of what that feels like. Even if you have different experiences, she said some of them have lost a child, some have lost a husband, some of them have lost a sibling. But she said at the end of the day, I've lost some friends through this, but I've also gained a lot more. And we were just talking about how important community is to support you when you are just in immeasurable amounts of pain, and how even the 12-step model, which I love, is that you get into a room full of complete strangers, and within the first part is it's all sharing. I mean, that's kind of what you do, and we all go around in a circle and share the most intimate details and pain. By the end of that meeting, you all are hugging each other. You're like, "I know you." It's just what and I wish that we could all be more vulnerable with one another like that all the time. I feel like I am, and sometimes people are a
That's
little, like,
beautiful.
taken aback. I kind of am that person anyway, but I just think it's so important to be vulnerable and to support one another, and we're all going through this experience together no matter what your circumstances. Life is hard. It's varying degrees of hard, and we all have these different stories, but all of us know grief. It's
Yes,
just we've all just experienced it differently, and we need that support. So I think it's beautiful, especially how scary this world can be, and is at this
definitely.
moment, especially.
But we're all on the same planet together. So,
Yes.
yeah, if we can recognize that. I was thinking of, I think it was Edgar Mitchell and some other astronauts speaking about William Shatner, too, I think, being outside of Earth, looking down from space and just having this incredibly spiritual experience, realizing how precious this planet is, that we're just, I mean, it's incredible when you think about just the miraculous nature of this planet, of life, that it exists at all. Um, and it's an opportunity to respect life rather than taking it for granted. You know, and greed. I think greed is a big kind of disease of our time. Just and we're seeing the consequences. So maybe there's that whole Gaia theory. Maybe recognizing there's an intelligence to this planet, and maybe we can't really perceive it. Or I'm not sure really quite what I'm trying to say, but I think that could be really powerful to, again, kind of shift our perspective and realize these resources aren't going to last forever, that we do impact nature, each other, animal life, and that there is this intricate ecosystem, and that there's this incredible interdependency. And if we can come back to recognizing that, maybe we can heal some of the things that are out of balance. Yeah.
That's so beautiful. Thank you so much, Christine. I'm excited to talk to you more in our real lives. And we're in
Same.
the and I want to know all the documentaries you love. And I just thank you so much for showing up for this podcast. I know this has been one of my favorite interviews. There's so many good nuggets. And I really appreciate just how eloquent you are and the insights that you shared today. I know that they are going to really resonate with people. So I just thank you for showing up with your time and energy.
Oh, thank you. Wow, that's so heartfelt. And I do look forward to connecting with you too. What city are you in, if you
I'm
don't
in
mind me
Prescott,
asking?
Arizona.
Oh, beautiful. That's such
Yes,
a gorgeous area.
it is such a gorgeous area.
Yes.
So there's magic here.
Neat.
There's magic in there's Arizona's a very magical place and a
It
very
is.
spiritual place.
Yes. Very magical place. I'm in love with this state. Yeah.
Me too, me too.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Christine, so much for joining me.
Thank you.